All right, let's start with this leading story now. President Donald Trump says that Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro had been captured and was being removed from the country. A U.S. attack on the country in the early morning struck civilian areas, Padrino said, and Venezuela is compiling information about dead and injured people. The Venezuelan government does not know the whereabouts of Maduro, or in fact his wife, Cilia Flores. Vice President Delcy Rodriguez said that on Saturday morning in an audio also played on state TV and demanded proof of life. For more, let's now bring in SABC News specialist correspondent Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, as we get your very latest from you, I want to just read for the benefit of our viewers what President Donald Trump posted on his Truth Social. In fact, it reads, the United States of America has successfully carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolas Maduro, who has been, along with his wife, captured and flown out of the country. This operation was done in conjunction with U.S. law enforcement. Give us the very latest, Sophie, before we even get to the context of this particular strike. What do we know so far on the ground?
We know that, indeed, President Maduro is not in Venezuela. It's not clear where he is at this moment. I did try to speak to Venezuelan diplomats to check whether they do have information on the whereabouts of the Venezuelan president, but they don't know yet. But information that's being available right now, there are unconfirmed reports that him leaving Venezuela is something that they agreed on. Apparently, the United States of America did indicate to countries such as China that they will engage in this operation. You know that the envoy of President Xi Jinping was in Venezuela yesterday. He even met with Maduro. Now, the problem is it's not clear where he is at this moment, but indeed, he is not in Venezuela. And we know that there are also reports that it's not clear whether the current statements that the Minister of Defense was killed, they are true. As you indicated, the Vice President saying that they will gather information and communicate later in terms of the impact of the strikes in that country, because it was quite a number of areas. The focus is on Caracas as the capital city and the military base that was attacked by the U.S. forces. But other areas were also affected. It looks like it was a well-coordinated plan operation by U.S. But the question for me is, were there people inside Venezuela who cooperated with the law enforcement agencies or the military of the United States of America? Because there's no way the U.S. could have done that without an assistance from people inside Venezuela.
And Sophie, of course, the experts have said that this particular action from the U.S. Could lead to years of chaos in the region. Venezuela itself has framed this as an oil-driven imperialist intervention. What is at the core of these strikes? And perhaps while you are there, just speak to us about any official reaction from other countries, including, of course, allies to Venezuela.
At stake is the oil in Venezuela. You know that Venezuela has got the largest oil reserves in the world. And even the sanctions that were imposed on Venezuela didn't deter the leadership of Venezuela to continue to take a hard line. And therefore, I think this action, the aim is to ensure that you are able to have access to the minerals of Venezuela, including oil. As we saw few days ago, President Trump was now talking about oil. He was not talking about the drug lords anymore, and that President Maduro is a dictator or questioning the election. It was about oil now. And therefore, I think that's it. You saw those vessels that were captured carrying oil, including one from China. It was about oil in recent days and recent times, as you follow what President Trump was saying. In terms of response, the Latin American countries have responded. The reaction is of concern that this will lead to security instability and political instability in that region. Because, you know, for example, a country like Brazil, the opposition is still trying to push for change. And ahead of elections in Brazil, this might give confidence to those who want President Lula out. Secondly, when you look at countries such as Cuba, that has always had to deal with the hostility from United States of America and opposition fleeing to the U.S. and continuing to try and destabilize Cuba, they will be emboldened. And there are many other countries in the Caribbean and also in Latin America who might feel the same way. Let's say, for example, Mexico. Yesterday we saw that earthquake. And we know that Mexico has been struggling in terms of trying to make sure the relationship between U.S. and Mexico doesn't deteriorate or are not negative, but we know there are problems.
Yeah. Events of this magnitude, Sophie, would normally trigger emergency UN Security Council sessions. What are we likely to see on that front?
The Venezuelan government, the statement that was released before President Trump posted on Truth Social, his social media platform, that they've captured President Maduro. We saw in a statement that they are emergency meeting of the Security Council, and we expect the ambassador of Venezuela to make that request at the UN, and we are likely going to see an emergency meeting of the UN today, because the UN has already issued a statement condemning this unilateral action, because it is in violation of the UN Charter, particularly Article 1 and 2. It speaks to the issue of the territorial independence and also sovereignty of states. And therefore, I think we will see that emergency meeting of the UN. But you will have a problem there, because the United States of America is a member of the United Nations Security Council with veto power. Also, when you look at the countries in Europe who are part of the Security Council with veto powers, they had reservations in terms of the leadership of President Maduro. And therefore, you will see a situation where they might veto the resolution that speaks to condemnation of the United States of America. So it will be that meeting, but it will not amount to anything. Only countries will issue statements there, but to have a resolution that will be adopted at the Security Council against the U.S., I don't see that happening with the P5.
Yeah. Sophie, as we wrap up our conversation, I know you've been in touch with Venezuela's ambassador to South Africa. He had, previously warned that this kind of confrontation was likely coming. Has Pretoria responded at all? How are they likely to respond, or the South African government?
The South African government hasn't responded yet, but I think when you look at South Africa's foreign policy that is anchored around peace, around the world. They will condemn the action. And as I indicated, it is in violation of the UN Charter Article 1 and 2 that speaks to respect for sovereignty of countries and territorial independence. You know that that's South Africa's view. And also the use of unilateral means rather than multilateral system to resolve standoff around the world. That is why South Africa went to International Court of Justice. It was in circumstances similar to this where Israel launching attack on Palestine in Gaza, where South Africa said, let's use the UN systems and the UN court or the World Court to settle this dispute rather than using military means. And therefore, you can predict that South Africa will not support the unilateral action of the United States of America.
All right, Sophie, thank you so much for that. Of course, our correspondent, Sophie Mokoena, there, just giving us the very latest in terms of what's happening in Venezuela. Not too long ago, in fact, President Donald Trump saying that the United States has captured Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro as well as his wife and have flown them out of the country after these large-scale strikes.